You stop for coffee, you visit a friend. Nothing unusual, nothing illegal. But along the way, your car may have been photographed again and again, its license plate recorded, its location stored, and its movements made searchable. Across the United States, automated license plate readers are appearing along roads, in neighborhoods, outside businesses, and near intersections. One of the largest networks belongs to Flock Safety, whose cameras are used by thousands of law enforcement agencies and communities to help locate stolen vehicles, identify suspects, and investigate crimes. And on the surface, the argument seems simple. If these cameras help police catch criminals, and you're not doing anything wrong, why should you care? But that question misses something important. People aren't only concerned about what they're doing. They're concerned about who's watching, what's being recorded, how long it's kept, who can search it, and what happens when the people controlling that information change. That's where a tool designed for public safety becomes something much larger, a political argument about government power, privacy, trust, and the limits we're willing to accept in exchange for security. And the anger surrounding these cameras isn't happening in theory. Communities are fighting over them. Officials are reconsidering them. Some cameras have even been vandalized and torn down. So why can a camera that most people barely notice provoke such a powerful reaction once they understand what it can do? The answer may have less to do with having something to hide, and much more to do with how the human mind responds when control over something we consider private is placed in someone else's hands. Flock safety cameras don't look especially threatening. They're small, usually mounted on poles near roads, entrances, or intersections. Most drivers pass them without noticing. But unlike a traditional traffic camera, their purpose isn't simply to watch a single location. Flock's system uses automated license plate recognition. As vehicles pass, cameras can capture identifying details such as the license plate, vehicle characteristics, location, and time. That information becomes searchable, allowing authorized users, often law enforcement, to look for vehicles connected to crimes or investigations. There's an obvious public safety argument for this. A stolen car can be located faster. A vehicle connected to a kidnapping, robbery, or violent crime can potentially be identified before investigators would have found it through traditional methods. To someone waiting for police to find a missing family member or dangerous suspect, faster information can mean everything. And that matters because safety is one of our most powerful psychological needs. When people feel threatened, they're often willing to accept measures they might question under ordinary circumstances. A camera can therefore represent something reassuring. Someone is watching, criminals can be found, and help may arrive sooner. But the same system can produce an entirely different feeling once people realize what makes it useful. The camera doesn't know beforehand which car belongs to a criminal. It records ordinary vehicles too. The usefulness of the network depends in part on collecting information before anyone knows whether that information will ever matter. That creates the tension at the center of this debate. Public safety offers one kind of psychological comfort, protection from people who may harm us. Privacy and autonomy offer another, the belief that our ordinary movements aren't something the government should routinely record, simply because the technology makes it possible. Neither feeling requires someone to be irrational. A person can want police to find a violent suspect quickly and still be uncomfortable knowing their own vehicle passed through the same searchable system on the way home. And once that realization occurs, the debate changes. The question is no longer simply whether surveillance can make us safer. It becomes whether feeling safer is enough to justify being watched. One of the most common arguments in favor of surveillance is also one of the simplest. If you're not doing anything wrong, why should you care if a camera records your license plate? It's a powerful argument because it shifts the question. Instead of asking whether the government should collect the information, it asks why an innocent person would object to it. Privacy begins to sound suspicious, as though wanting it implies there must be something worth hiding. But psychologically, privacy serves a much broader purpose. Self-determination theory identifies autonomy. the ability to maintain a sense of control over our own lives. As a basic psychological need, we make decisions every day about what we share, who we share it with, and when. Most of those decisions have nothing to do with wrongdoing. We close the bathroom door. We lower our voices during private conversations. We use passwords. We shut the curtains at night. None of those behaviors suggest guilt. They reflect something ordinary. People prefer some control over access to themselves. Government surveillance changes that relationship because the decision may no longer belong to us. We don't choose whether the camera snaps a picture of our vehicle. We may not know when it happens, and we may have little understanding of where that information goes afterward. That loss of choice connects to psychological reactance theory. When people believe a freedom or personal choice is being restricted, they often become motivated to defend it. The reaction can include anger, resistance, and stronger attachment to the freedom that suddenly feels threatened. This helps explain why opposition to systems like FLoC can become intense even among people who have no intention of breaking the law. The reaction isn't necessarily about hiding behavior. It can be about losing control over information that previously felt like nobody else's business. The public safety argument still matters. If recording thousands of ordinary vehicles helps locate one kidnapped child or dangerous suspect, many people will consider that a reasonable trade. But calling it a trade is important, because something is being exchanged. We're gaining another tool for public safety while surrendering some control over information about where we go. And once people recognize that exchange, nothing to hide stops answering the real question. The question becomes, how much privacy should an innocent person have to surrender in order to prove they have nothing to hide? For many people, the problem with surveillance isn't simply that information is being collected. It's the question of who controls it. A camera used to find a stolen vehicle can sound reasonable. A searchable network capable of showing where thousands of vehicles have traveled feels different. The technology hasn't changed. What changes is the amount of trust we're being asked to place in the people who can access it. That brings us to institutional trust. The confidence people have that governments, police departments, courts, and other institutions will use their authority competently. When institutional trust is high, people are generally more willing to accept government authority. When trust falls, even policies created for legitimate purposes can become suspicious. And trust isn't based only on what an institution promises to do today. People also think about what it could do tomorrow. A database created under one police chief, mayor, governor, or administration may eventually be controlled by someone else. Rules can change. Access can expand. Technology can become more powerful. That uncertainty connects with ambiguity aversion. People tend to become uncomfortable when risks are difficult to measure, or when important outcomes depend on unknown probabilities. With surveillance, many people simply don't know the boundaries. Who can search the data? What qualifies as a legitimate search? How long is information retained? Can another agency access it? What prevents misuse? The less certain those answers feel, the harder it becomes to evaluate the trade. Supporters can reasonably argue that oversight, audits, and departmental policies exist precisely to prevent abuse. And most searches may have completely legitimate purposes. But psychologically, trust doesn't require us to believe that most people will behave responsibly. It requires confidence that the system can deal with the person who doesn't. That distinction matters. We lock doors even though most people walking past our homes aren't burglars. We protect passwords even though most people would never attempt to access our accounts. Precautions often exist because the consequences of the exception matter more than the intentions of the majority. So when people object to government surveillance, they may not be saying that every police officer, agency, or official is untrustworthy. They may be asking a much harder question. Should a system involving millions of innocent people depend on trust in the first place? Surveillance has an unusual place in American politics. Opposition doesn't belong entirely to the left or the right. People who disagree on almost everything can still become uncomfortable with the idea of government having the ability to follow their movements. But political identity can change how that power feels. Social identity theory helps explain why. We naturally divide the world into groups. Political affiliation can become one of those identities. Once that happens, our judgment of government power can depend partly on whether we believe people like us are controlling it or being targeted by it. A surveillance system may feel acceptable when we trust the people using it. The same system can suddenly feel dangerous when political power changes hands. The cameras haven't moved. The database hasn't disappeared. Only our relationship with the people controlling it has changed. Motivated reasoning takes this further. We don't always evaluate information as neutral observers. We're remarkably good at finding reasons that support conclusions we already prefer. If surveillance is being used toward a goal we support, its benefits can become easier to see. When the same power is used toward something we oppose, its risks can become much harder to ignore. That creates an uncomfortable political problem. Government surveillance isn't built for only one administration or one political moment. Powers created by people we trust can eventually belong to people we don't. This is why debates over surveillance can produce unexpected alliances. Someone deeply concerned about aggressive policing may distrust the system for one reason. Someone suspicious of federal power may distrust it for another. Their politics may be completely different, yet both arrive at the same concern. Once government gains a new capability, giving that capability back isn't always easy. Supporters of Flock can make a legitimate argument that technology shouldn't become guilty simply because it could be misused. Police already possess enormous investigative powers, and society generally responds by creating rules around those powers rather than eliminating them entirely. But surveillance introduces a difficult question because its value grows with its reach. More cameras can produce more information. Politics eventually changes. The technology remains. So perhaps the fairest way to judge surveillance power isn't to imagine it controlled by the government we trust most. It's to imagine the exact same power controlled by the government we trust least. Every debate over surveillance eventually reaches the same question. Where should the line be drawn? Few people would argue that police should have no investigative tools. At the same time, few would be comfortable giving the government unlimited access to their movements. The disagreement exists somewhere between those two extremes. Procedural justice theory helps explain why the rules surrounding surveillance matter so much. People are more likely to accept authority when they believe the process behind it is fair. Oversight matters. Knowing that someone must justify access to information can change how legitimate that authority feels. This is why the argument over Flock isn't only about what the cameras can do, it's also about what must happen before someone can use the information they collect. A system with meaningful restrictions can feel very different from one where access seems broad or poorly understood. But another psychological principle makes the debate harder. Loss aversion describes our tendency to feel losses more strongly than equivalent gains. Once something is perceived as ours, giving up part of it can feel disproportionately significant. Privacy works in a similar way. Most of us grew up assuming that driving across town didn't automatically create a searchable record of where our vehicle had been. Technology has changed what's possible faster than our expectations have changed with it. So when surveillance expands, people may experience it as the loss of something they already possessed. Not secrecy, not the ability to commit crimes unnoticed, simply the ordinary expectation that moving through public life didn't require creating a permanent trail. The competing benefit is real. Better information can help investigators solve crimes faster, and when a serious crime occurs, objections to surveillance can suddenly seem much less important than finding the person responsible. But policies designed during moments of fear often remain after the fear passes. Technology rarely becomes less capable over time. That leaves us with a line that society has to draw before the next emergency draws it for us. The question isn't whether public safety matters. The question is how much power we're willing to surrender in its name. Flock cameras aren't the beginning of some dystopian future. They're tools. A stolen vehicle can be recovered. A dangerous suspect can be located. A family waiting for answers may get them sooner. That's why this debate isn't easy. Public safety is powerful because it speaks to something basic in us. We want protection from the things we can't control. When technology promises more security, accepting it can feel like the responsible choice. But privacy speaks to something just as human. We want some control over our own lives. We want boundaries, even when we have nothing to hide. The problem is that these two needs don't always carry equal weight in the moment. A crime is visible. A victim is real. The benefit of finding a suspect can be immediate. The loss of privacy is quieter. Nothing dramatic necessarily happens when another camera appears. Most of us will drive past it tomorrow and never think about it. That difference matters. We tend to respond more strongly to threats we can see than to changes whose consequences are uncertain or far away. Public safety, therefore, has a natural psychological advantage in this argument. Its benefits are easier to picture. The cost of surveillance is harder to measure until someone crosses a line. That doesn't mean every camera is an abuse of power. It doesn't mean every police department will misuse the information. And it doesn't mean technology like Flock has no legitimate place in law enforcement. It means skepticism has a legitimate place too. The people questioning these systems aren't necessarily rejecting public safety. They may simply be asking whether every improvement in our ability to watch should automatically become an improvement in our willingness to be watched. Maybe the most important question isn't whether Flock can help solve crimes. Because once we become comfortable giving away a little privacy for a little more security, the next decision becomes easier. Then the next one does too. Not because someone forced us, because eventually being watched can start to feel normal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this vid, don't forget to subscribe. Stay strong and healthy. Much love.